Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. As you can see there, we have a new intro to the program to kind of modernize the program, give it a bit more of a modern feel. And in this program today, we'll be discussing how we can bridge the Christian and Jewish communities through the incredible ministry that is Bridges for Peace. And my special guest is all the way from Israel, but originally from Canada, Reverend Peter Fast, the CEO of Bridges for Peace in Israel. So Peter, it's an absolute pleasure that you could join me on the Middle East Report today. And I've got to thank Michael as well for bringing you here to our studios. But do you just want to share with our viewers how your journey began? Share with us what your childhood was like growing up in Canada, which Canada is such a beautiful, incredible country.
Yeah, and we're known to be so polite, you know, and say, I'm sorry for everything.
Not like your neighbours in the south.
No, exactly. No, I was born in Toronto, the area of Toronto, Ontario, southern Ontario, not far from Niagara Falls. And I mean, the big impact on my life was the home I was born in, I was raised in. My dad's a pastor, still is, so about 45 years. And I was raised to love the Word of God, to just connect with it, that's the authority, but also raised that God is active in our time. It was raised with a love for Israel. Before I was born, my parents went to Israel multiple times in the 1970s. And so growing up, I would go to these Israel nights where my dad would have, 30, 40 people and put on those little projectors where the fan kind of goes over and goes on and makes you kind of fall asleep. But I never did, because I was just glued to the screen, seeing these pictures of the Temple Mount, seeing these pictures of Capernaum, where Jesus lived and ministered, the whole area of the Galilee, Masada. These are early images in my mind. Hearing my dad study Hebrew, he was an academic, he was a pastor, he was someone who influenced. And then growing up in the Toronto area, Toronto has the largest Jewish population in Canada. And so meeting and connecting with Jewish people, visiting synagogues, all of this really had a deep influence. But faith was very real. It was modeled before me in the lives of my parents. They're very ministry and people oriented and kind of a global perspective, that it's not just like you stay in your own little shell or you stay just at home, but it's supposed to impact your life and it's supposed to be seen. And so I have 3 brothers, so it's, there was a lot of kind of alpha male competition there, but a deep love for Israel, a deep love for the Bible and for books and studying and history.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing, Peter. And Peter, can you also share with us as well how the Lord led you to where you achieved degrees in was it biblical studies, as well as a BA in intercultural studies, as well as an MA in just read my notes here, Judeo-Christian Studies, and this is what you did, your Masters at the International University of Divinity. Share with us why it was so important for you to have that academic background and credentials.
Yeah, people pursue degrees for different reasons. I wanted to pursue it not just to know things or knowledge or to sound fancy or have initials after my name. I wanted to utilize what I would earn, what I would immerse my life in. And as I kind of was beginning to go in that direction, seeing my dad dedicated, I've never seen something modeled so brilliantly, especially as a young boy. I mean, you're just in this phase of life where you get influenced and you see things around you. Seeing my dad every single day, studying the Bible, writing out his sermon notes, pulling books off the shelves, sometimes sitting in his office and just taking it all in, rubbed off on me. Not everybody has this mindset that wants to research, study, write essays, write sermons, and dig into Hebrew and Greek, but a lot of that rubbed off onto me. So I did resist it a little bit, because do I want to go and earn such degrees and enter into what people would call full-time ministry of some kind? So the Lord had to work in my heart, but He led me into that direction, and I jumped into it. I wanted to both immerse myself in these studies, but also find ways to utilize it, which when I was about 18, I really felt the Lord drawing me into what would become, especially right now and for the foreseeable future, a life dedicated to Israel, Jewish-Christian relations, and like focusing on that. So the degrees that you read off I mean, I'm able to not just be equipped and know things, but to utilize it. I speak all over the world. I interact with all kinds of Jewish people. To have those degrees and to understand not just the Bible deeper, but Jewish people today and how to bridge that gap. So it's actually really, the Lord sees all.
Amen to that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Peter, when did you know for definite the Lord was really going to call you to stand up for Israel and the Jewish people?
Yeah.
And share with us as well your first visit to Israel, because whenever you go to Israel, but always your first time when you're in Israel, it is such a special occasion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not only does the Bible come alive, but you get a sense of God's incredible presence. You get a sense that this is an incredibly dynamic country, which Israel is.
Absolutely. You can't take it for granted. I have talked with hundreds of people, especially through Bridges for Peace, because one of the times I was there, I was a manager of their group and guest relations. So I'm like the kind of the conduit to introduce Bridges for Peace to Christians and Jews and interested tour groups and people like this. And I would ask Christians, because I'm always like, curious, like, what brought you here? How does it feel being here? And I think it should feel very real. It's not like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Israel is a nation. It has real soil and mountains like other nations, but it's the only nation in the world where God says he's put his hand. And it's kind of our faith merging into this place of real people, including Jesus, who is there, and we believe he'll come back to there. So it means something, and it draws people into a sense of family. Something like I'm inheriting or I'm connecting to something. And so when I'd ask people these questions, they would say, I feel at home. And some of them would say, I don't know why. I've never been into Israel before or really understood Israel. I came here maybe to check off a box. But then they have an intense spiritual encounter that they've never had anywhere else. I believe, of course, there's nowhere in the world you can hide from God. You can pray to him and you can have an amazing God moment on the streets of London or in Toronto, Canada. But I also believe God speaks in unique ways in Israel. I think that's what's special about it. I think that's why people, in trying to find the answer to what they feel, it's like they're not just connecting to ancient history or ancient biblical history, because I believe prophecy is happening in our time. So they're actually connecting to like biblical prophecy in the now, biblical history now. And that does something to us if you have eyes to see and ears to hear. And for me personally, I felt the Lord moving me in this direction. Like I said, I absolutely love history. I love Middle Eastern history, ancient Semitic history, Roman history, all of these things. But there's something about ancient Jewish history and the Israelites and all of this stuff and the story of the Bible going right through the pages that really spoke profoundly to me and the modern Israel. And the things that I'm seeing with my eyes that Jeremiah and Isaiah, Zechariah and Jesus himself spoke of. So that was something that drew me, but I would say I had a real intensity that this is like an anointing when I went my first trip to Israel in 2003. And it was unusual. It was not a church tour or some kind of like study program. I went actually with a reserve IDF program called SAR-L.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So I did 5 weeks on a paratrooper base.
Amazing.
Near Tel Nof, actually parallel to Tel Nof Air Force Base, not far from Tel Aviv. And I was among a few other Christian volunteers and some Jewish volunteers living on this base for 5 weeks, working with all kinds of IDF soldiers from backgrounds like you couldn't even imagine, including meeting, which is great when you talk to people who have these stereotypes about Israel, including meeting Arab Muslims serving in the IDF. And so that 5 weeks really impacted me. It was very different. And then I went back the next year for a practicum related to my studies. You read the one degree was intercultural studies, so I needed an 8-month practicum. And I lived in Israel. That was my first time with Bridges for Peace. So I was just kind of a grunt on the food bank floor. I was in home repair program. I was going into people's homes, Iranian Jews who had fled Iran, Yemenite Jews, people from France, people from Spain, all over to repair their homes, hear from them, get to know them, and share with them who I was. And so this is just, it's like a process of, it's not like I woke up one morning thinking, I think I will live in Israel for the rest of my life. It was a real process and wanting what God wants ultimately.
We know, and you unpacked, that we are living in biblical times. We've seen incredible prophecies being fulfilled, particularly since the re-establishment of the modern state of Israel back in 1948. We've seen a dead language, the Hebrew language, come alive with Ben Yehuda writing this language. The Jewish people have been gathered from the four corners of the earth. You can meet Jewish people from all over the world who have made Israel their home in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. But it's not until you actually connect with the Israeli people themselves do you feel that special connection to the land. And learning Hebrew as well helps you to know how Israelis speak, but also helps you to understand the culture as well. Just share with us the importance of actually connecting with the Israeli people themselves and making Israeli friends, because I know that through your work you've met a lot of Israeli friends and a lot of Israeli contacts as well, and are really blessing them in a very powerful way.
Simon, it's, you know, every word I try to think of what we're doing, it feels like it falls short, because I believe it's supernatural. You know the history, you know so much that has gone between the relationships between Jews and Christians in the history, and the stereotypes and the suspicions and the fears and all of this stuff that as an organization in our name we have to bridge over. And it's amazing because there's Jewish people on the other side that are bridging the gap on their side, who say, I might not have all of this figured out, we might have some core differences in what we believe, but we actually, we're related. We should actually walk hand in hand. We should do life and community life. And there's layers to that. But there's nothing like immersion of, like you said, walking the streets, but having their homes. These people opening up their homes to you, trusting you. And that's something with Bridges for Peace, is over 50 years since our founder moved there in 1963, has each step, and it hasn't been easy, as you know, when you look at the history, because it's like everything what we're doing today is overcoming and it's impacting where we've been. And when a Jewish person reacts like they don't know if they can trust you, or I don't want to go there in conversation, or all of this, there's a background to that. But I believe God is opening up powerful doors. And so when we get invites to a Shabbat table, a Sabbath table, this is amazing. Or when a rabbi or a member of Knesset or a Jewish leader or a principal or a teacher sits across from me, even my neighbor, and asks me, like, what do you think God is doing prophetically? Do you believe that? Or like, what do you think, when is Messiah coming? Or what do you think about the nature of evil, especially after October 7th? You can see this. And of course, Israel has issues like any country, but you can see it very, very clear when you walk the streets and when you live there and you do life. And that's the thing. We've worked extremely hard, to build a relationship of trust. And when you build that, then you can actually start sharing other things.
Absolutely.
It's like what we agree on mutually, which we actually agree on a lot. And then even what we disagree with doesn't have to be so scary. And it's like, okay, we can walk through that because we actually want to build something together. And that is by far a miracle. And the years, the decades that we've walked through with towns and cities, the mayors and the municipalities, the leaders, to rabbis, to social workers, to members of Knesset, to all of the strata, security, MDA, the ambulance service, to people in the army, the medical corps. It's just like when you look at it all and you remove all of our programs, it boils down to relationship. And this, I can't do it by my own strength, by my own wisdom. I'll pretty much ruin it every time. But with God's help and with His power and wisdom and courage, we can bridge something and actually turn back, or put a stop to things that have happened and are unfortunately still happening in our time today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, I just want to just draw upon something you mentioned there, because this has been probably one of the greatest privileges of my life, not only in broadcasting, but to develop those deep friendships with Israelis and develop deep friendship with the Jewish people. And that's why I have many Israeli guests and Jewish guests on the program, because you're dealing with almost 3,000-4,000 years of history.
Yes.
And culture, civilization, knowledge, wisdom. And of course, the Bible and God is in their DNA. Whether they choose to accept that or not, it's there. And when you bring Christians and Jews together, this is when God does something really special. because he wants to remind them of
well
who
said.
they are. So could you unpack for us the vision and the history behind Bridges for Peace? Because what you guys are doing is breaking down that wall of hostility that has literally been there from the Christian community to the Jewish community for over 2,000 years. And we're so privileged over the last 20 or so years that that wall is literally been broken down. And God is really pouring his love out on the Jewish people and raising up Christians like yourself to really stand with Israel and the Jewish people at this critical time in history.
Yeah, I'd love to share it because the vision of Bridges for Peace goes back to Dr. G. Douglas Young. And he moved to Israel with him and his wife in 1963, but his vision, what he was seeing, was a disconnect. On the Christian side, a disconnect to the Bible, the Hebraic context of the Bible, the place of Israel and the Jewish people, relational issues of not even understanding the history between Jews and Christians. So that was a real burden of his. He was one of the leading scholars in ancient Semitic languages, so he already knew the who's who in these fields. And when he moved to Israel, you know, he was on digs with Teddy Kollek and Yigal Yadin, like the people that we read about. You know, Yigal Yadin uncovered Masada. So these are like major people. He also won the Yakir Yerushalayim, which is like, Yakir means like precious, of Jerusalem. So he was like a pioneer from the Christian side, reaching out to the Jews, to the Jewish community. Initially what he wanted to do is bring seminary students from around the world, mostly from Canada, the United States and the UK, bring them to Israel. He started the Holy Land Institute of the Bible, which today is the Jerusalem University College of the Bible in partnership with the Hebrew U. And he would bring these seminarian students into his classroom, and they would study Hebrew, and they would look at the Bible, not just as ancient history, but what's going on today. It's all about connecting the dots and overcoming this gap. The more he did that, it was second nature for him to connect with the Jewish community. So he'd have rabbis and dignitaries and ambassadors into his home. But the more he did that, basically, he was like, this needs to be practical, not just educational. In the area of like some doctorate seminarian student, because most Christians aren't going to become PhD researchers and seminarian students. So not setting that as something that shouldn't be pursued. He's just like, this needs to be practical, a practical expression of this. And Bridges for Peace was founded out of that vision in 1976. And so we've grown to what we are today, and the programs that we do are amazing. And so on one side, it's reaching the Christians. It's reaching out to the church. This is what God is doing. God is on the move. He's not just up in the clouds. He's not just the God of history, but he's on the move in our time. And this is what it means. We are connected. We're grafted in to this olive tree. Look at God's plans and purposes for Israel right before our eyes. I mean, Jeremiah 16, verse 14, God says through Jeremiah that no more am I going to be known as the God who brought you out of Egypt, but the God who will bring you out of the four corners. And he lists the ancient words, the ancient names of these nations. We're living in that time, Simon. It's remarkable how much of the church doesn't see that. So G. Douglas Young wanted to connect us to that, but not only just connect us, he wanted a practical expression of reaching out to the Jewish community. And now that's being reciprocated. So there's two sides of what we do. And on the other side is this compassion of unconditional love, of showing the Jewish community, for many of them, a different type of Christian than they've ever met before. Because I've met so many newly arrived immigrants, they've made Aliyah, they get onto our program from former Soviet Union countries, and their perceptions of what is a Christian. Not just like, well, what do you believe, but what is a Christian? Because one of the reasons I'm here is because Christian children would beat up my children or spit on them or curse them, or these, graffiti would be sprayed on. So it's the perception of what is a Christian. For many people, it was like a Christian is someone that I'm afraid of, or I stay away, or they're out to eradicate us as a people. And so there's these misperceptions, suspicions, and stereotypes and fears that since 1963, especially since 76 with our founding, we've been working tirelessly. Because once you build that, okay, now we actually are building something genuine, and you mentioned these walls coming down. There's still a lot of work to do, but we're seeing things, especially post October 7, that any organization that's worked with Israel, the Jewish people around the world has never seen. You know, and not even my words. I've talked with numerous rabbis who say, because of October 7th, they believe that God has taken Christians and Jews and united them in such a way never to be separated. Like it's just going to get closer and closer, and God's doing something behind the scenes because of what they're seeing. And they're making a differentiation between Christians who will stand with them and how they read their Bible and what they see, the eyes of how they see Israel, and other Christians who ignore it or kind of lift up the rug and sweep it under and put it around because they don't want to cause division or any of this. So I think it's remarkable times as much as it is challenging and difficult.
Absolutely. So let's have a look now at the vision for Bridges for Peace. And this is the mandate of the ministry that's doing incredible work in blessing Israel and the Jewish people.
Bridges for Peace. Christians supporting Israel and building relationships between Christians and Jews in Israel and around the world. Bridges for Peace, 50 years of blessing Israel and the church through compassion and revelation. Compassion, feeding Israel's hungry, caring for Israel's needy, repairing homes, giving hope to children in poverty, helping the Jewish people return to their ancient homeland. Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Revelation, bringing the Bible to life in its ancient context, revealing the truth of Israel's prophetic significance, telling the story of Israel's miraculous rebirth, connecting Christians and the Jewish people through a grassroots global team of Christian representatives. For God's instruction shall go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Bridges for Peace, a Matthew 25 ministry dedicated to supporting the nation of Israel and bridging the centuries-old gap between Christians and Jews. Bridges for Peace, your Israel connection.
And there's an excellent overview of the ministry that is Bridges for Peace, that is bridging that gap between Christians and Jews and showing God the love that he has for his people, Israel, and the Jewish nation. Peter, now tell us about your own personal story and ministry with Bridges for Peace, because I think back in January 2023, you were appointed as the international CEO of the organisation. I mean, firstly, to be appointed in that position gives you incredible authority, because it gives you a kind of worldview. From Israel, you can see the nations and interact with the nations, but also the fact that 2023 was an extremely difficult year. We had a new led Benjamin Netanyahu government with some of the most extreme hardline coalition partners in Israel's history, which meant that Christian-Jewish relations were, it was difficult. It was difficult in broadcasting, it was tense. This new Israeli government wasn't favourable to Christians at all. And then, of course, we had the horrors of October the 7th. So share with us how 2023 was for you, and as well as getting to grips with leading Bridges for Peace in Israel and changing the organisation to really hit the next generation with God's love and purposes for Israel and the Jewish people.
Well, you finished that question brilliantly, because that's what we want to do, is hit that next generation. But it was a build-up before we had kids. My wife and I, we lived in Israel for 3 years. We felt called back to Canada to lead Bridges for Peace in Canada, and I achieved the Lord raised me to the standard of becoming the national director of Canada. And in October of 2020, I got the phone call to, do you want to be the next international CEO? The international board was looking for a new CEO. The current CEO at that time was laying out a plan of retirement and succession. And I mean, in a long story short, the Lord had spoken over our lives for 10 years that this may be. And so I made the biggest decision of my life in the library of my home with my wife upstairs. And so when I was asked, do you need to pray about it? I said, no, we'll accept. We'll move to Israel. And at that time, we had 3 kids, 3 children. And so that was enormous, finding my replacement in Canada. but selling the house and introducing a little bit more intimately, introducing Israel to my children, but also doing FaceTime with people in Israel so they could see the faces of people that they were going to meet, because we wanted to do as much as we could to make it the transition as easy as possible. And then we sold our house, we packed everything up and shipped it across the Atlantic and across the Mediterranean to Israel. So like you mentioned, we moved to Israel January 4th, 2023. I became CEO officially in June. And, so I'm very familiar at that point. I'm very familiar with Bridges for Peace. I had been introduced to Bridges for Peace for the first time in 2001. So it was like this long history, but stepping into the position and role as CEO, like you said, the authority, the influence, the voice, the burden of leadership that comes upon any of our shoulders, yourself included, doing something like this. It's like people watch you, they look up to you, they listen to your voice and what you have to say, and they make judgments, and that navigates them. And we want to be used for good. We want to be used by the Lord. And so when October 7th happened, that was, everything was, it was like hitting pause. And in fact, people have still said every day is October 7th. And so the last 10 months, I have barely slept. Like, it's just the enormous weight of what we're doing. Pre-October 7th, we were running all of our programs, feeding 24,000 needy Israelis every month, 60 tons of food, working in schools, providing all kinds of services. And we'd been doing this for decades. But when October 7th happened, everything changes. I mean, within the first 2 months after the 7th, you had 500,000 Israelis displaced. I think it's about 60 to 80,000 still displaced from the north. You were meeting people. I've never met so many people in my life that have had members of their families and friends murdered. They have heard them being burned to death. They've heard them being shot. I mean, when you think back, people that we've probably met, that those things sound a lot like or in common are survivors of the Holocaust. And the greatest loss of Jewish life in a single day since Auschwitz-Birkenau shut down, 1945. And so this shook the nation of Israel. It shook the Jewish community around the world. And I would say the supporters, the lovers, the people who pray for Israel and the Jewish community, the Christians around the world. It just transformed everything. I met the foreign minister in 2 weeks after October 7th, and he opened his speech to Christian leaders. He was talking to Christian leaders. He said, on October 7th, the devil came into Israel. And this sense of loss, of trauma, of desperation, and even things that would be normally taboo, like people typically don't say, I'm in trauma counseling, I can't sleep, I have nightmares all the time, are saying it and being very open. Strangers. You get into a 30-second conversation with someone and you don't have to explain everything. Everybody knows. Everybody's at the same place. And the hostage releases in November, and the current hostages that still are in captivity, the whole country is groaning. There's a despair, but at the same time a unity. There's like this really strong unity to press through, a determination to press through. And Bridges for Peace were in the middle of this. On October 9th, I drove down to Sderot with 1,000 bags of food and clothing, and there were still terrorist infiltrations. For your viewers to understand, when October 7th happened, the last terrorist who was killed by the Israeli forces was 3 weeks later. So when I went down on the 9th, I didn't go down to get a trophy. I didn't really think about it. This is what we do. In the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, we stand with Israel. And I don't have a death wish, but we stand with them. And I drove down there, and it was like an apocalyptic film. Burning cars, bodies still out, rockets, burning buildings. Sderot is a city of 40,000. It was like emptied. The only people there were soldiers on active combat patrols, going down alleys, searching homes, in ditches, and there were literally abandoned vehicles with suitcases. The doors hadn't even been shut. So it was just like coming onto a film set of an apocalyptic film. And yet, this is what we do. Thousands of kilos of food. But we've also purchased computers and printers to catalog victims. We've purchased bomb shelters. intensive care unit ambulances and rapid response cars. We flew 1,200 kilos of emergency medical aid from the UK. I'm so proud of this. I phoned up Michael Traherne, the national director. I said, what's the easiest and quickest way and cheapest, if we can, to get aid here? Because to FedEx, it was ridiculous. Michael did crunched the numbers and said, actually, it's cheaper for myself to fly the aid over. And there's some amazing God moments with El Al and friends in good places. And they flew over in multiple waves: combat medical aid, tourniquets, socks, plasma gel to fill bullet wounds, medikits, electrolytes, all of these things, and then we would take them and give them out. So those kinds of stories, I think, will go down in history. We're never, as an organization, going back to kind of what we did. Of course, all of our pledges and the people we help is ongoing, but Israel has changed forever, and with it, Bridges for Peace. And you are seeing that ripple effect go around the world.
I mean, I saw kibbutz near Oz. I saw one of the car parks that was destroyed. Yeah. I saw the devastation, but this was months on from October the 7th. You literally went 2 days later. Yeah. And now a new report has come out saying that, according to the JNS, which is the Jewish News Syndicate, that 7,000 were involved in October the 7th, including something like a region of 4,000 or 5,000 terrorists, but also residents of Gaza who took part in the atrocities. I mean, this probably, I would say, were probably the worst crimes committed against humanity and against the Jewish people in the 21st century.
Absolutely.
On October the 7th. Share with us, how are you also dealing with this? Because, you know, to see what you saw, to be there in the south of Israel, to see the destruction and the sheer magnitude of what happened on October the 7th, how have you been able to process that and deal with that? I know that you're very driven in terms of wanting to help the Jewish people, but it does have a toll and a sociological impact on you personally as well. Yeah,
and I mean, just with children and a family. Like, we're not tourists, we live there. Our Bridges for Peace volunteers and staff, they live there. Our volunteers, some of them will be there for 3 months or 6 months, but they could be there for years. So we don't live in a dormitory or in a compound. We live spread out throughout the city. So all of our neighbors could be Israeli Jews, Israeli Arabs, whatever. And so with missiles and sirens and things like this, picking up, grabbing your children and running, thank God we have a safe room in our home. But still, that's shocking, to pick up your children, grab your dog, and run to your bomb shelter. And we live in the southern part of Jerusalem in an area called Malcha. So there's Gilo and Talpiot, Bethlehem is just on the other side. And there were missiles being intercepted by the Iron Dome above us, and you can the house rattling, and you can hear these. That was actually the one thing that would calm my oldest boy down. It was counting the interceptions. And so now his brain has like been rewired. We were in France this last January, and the red alert on the phone, there's an app you can download, and I would actually recommend your viewers to download it, because when any missile is fired into Israel, it goes off, and you don't have to be in Israel. When it goes off, you can pray. And so we were in France, and it goes off, and my oldest boy starts crying and yelling, "We got to get to the bomb shelter." He forgot he was in Paris. And so it has had a massive effect on us and Bridges for Peace, the community of Bridges for Peace. There's like 30 children. So there's many of our volunteers that have children there. And that's a big prayer request, is that takes a strain. But we get through this with the strength of the Lord. So I'd say very high morale. People are very passionate, but very tired. And you can see that stress. And going to Kfar Aza personally, Kibbutz Be'eri, some of these places you've gone to, and smelling the remains in the first couple of weeks of a family that was murdered and burned in Kfar Aza, that doesn't leave you. Watching the content, hearing the stories, sitting down with survivors, going and sitting Shiva, which is the 7 period of days of mourning, sitting with a family that is lost, going to funerals, and it's just over and over. So I found myself, I would work extremely hard at making all kinds of decisions and watching horrific content and meeting people who had been emotionally and traumatized, and who would just open up because they want to open up and pass something. It's a release. And I would take it, be strong throughout the day, And then I would drive home. And my whole drive home, I would cry. And then I'd get home and I'd have to be, okay, I got to put on a brave face. I have to be that loving father coming home to the children because my children are dealing with this. And every single day from October 7th to the end of January, my oldest son asked me, are there missiles that are going to fly into Israel today? Why do people hate Jews? Why are they trying to destroy Israel? This is what we had to process.
So let's see Peter in action, and this is him reporting from Kfar Aza, which was absolutely devastated by Hamas on October the 7th.
And this neighborhood specifically very, very close to Gaza. This is the young generation neighborhood, Ador Tzair, the place that took the most hit in the kibbutz. You can see it.
We are in Kfar Aza, in one of the worst parts of the community that was hit on October 7th by terrorists. They came through here. The destruction leaves me with just no words.
This one is kidnapped, this one is kidnapped, this one is kidnapped, this one is kidnapped. This one is dead, this one is dead. The guy that I told you that he ran away is from the third house.
You can see burned homes around me. Bullet holes sprayed through doors, broken windows. Over 62 people were murdered in this community. 19 were kidnapped, and I'm asking you all around the world to pray for the people of Kfar Aza, to give to our crisis fund, to support these people. The level of trauma and hurt, our contact that has walked us through and is telling us the stories. Her best friends were murdered. People she knows were butchered, traumatized. She read to us the desperate messages through WhatsApp of all these community members talking to each other. When is security going to come? When are the soldiers going to come? I hear Arabic being spoken. I can hear gunfire. Who's going to come and help us? Israel has gone through an awful, awful time. And we as Christians around the world, we've said, comfort my people. We've said verses like, for such a time as this. Now is our time. Look at the destruction and the agony and the pain. Israel has been harmed. People have been destroyed, families ripped apart. Are we going to stand up now? Yes, it has to be yes. So I cry out to you to pray, to give, to get involved, to stand with Israel, to discern between what's false and what's right, to be a light and push back the darkness, because this place is empty. But you can just see the remnants of pain and trauma. Please, will you make a difference? Stand with us. I beg you, stand with us. I'm here on the grounds of where the Nova Festival party happened on October 7th. This is in southern Israel. We're a quarter of a mile from the Gaza border near Re'im. And on October 7th, 3,600 Israelis gathered here. Many to dance, listen to music, but there was also security, police, caterers, all kinds of people. And then on that morning, rockets streamed across the sky behind me, and hundreds upon hundreds of terrorists from Hamas attacked this location, slaughtering people. 3,600 people scattered everywhere, in every direction you can't even imagine. There wasn't tall grass that we see around. It was very short. This is October. The trees, there's no place to hide. 375 young people, security, police officers, caterers, were cut down and murdered here on this location. Why? Because they were Jewish. They're Israeli Jews. This was an attack against Israel. And this is the place that represents this awful, awful bloodshed. On October 7th, it was the largest loss of Jewish life in a single day since the end of the Holocaust. And Bridges for Peace, we've partnered with the Isaiah Project and other partners to help the IDF and the government secure this site. Why? Because it's going to be the future location of Israel's second Yad Vashem. hand and name. Yad Vashem in Jerusalem is Israel's Holocaust Memorial Museum. This is going to be a second location, remembering and paying tribute to the events of October 7th at the location where 375 Israeli Jewish people were murdered and cut down here. This is going to be a place where hundreds of thousands of people come to remember those events, to learn about those events. And Bridges for Peace is a partner in honoring their memory and blessing the people of Israel and standing with them hand in hand, arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder in our sorrow and grief.
Outstanding reports there by Peter himself, and if you go onto the Bridges for Peace YouTube page, you'll see a whole range of excellent videos where I've got them for this program today. Your media work is outstanding. The videos that you're producing are excellent, hard-hitting, telling the truth and communicating what you're seeing through your eyes to a Christian community that is so important, because we know with our mainstream media, when they covered the horrors of October the 7th, never gave it justice in terms of the sheer magnitude of what occurred on that day. But share with us, for example, the discussion we had prior to this program, that you are in contact with around 23 different community leaders, whether they're mayors from Israeli towns and cities through the various aid projects. Share with us the personal loss of people that you knew, that you lost on October the 7th, and people that Bridges for Peace work with there. It was great to see David Neck-Ruckman there. He's been a guest on the Middle East Report. He's a great guy. And Rabbi Shmuel Bauman, two amazing Jewish people as well that have made Aliyah to Israel and making a huge difference in terms of Jewish-Christian relations. But share with us deep impact that the loss of those relationships and the horrific murders, the rapes, the tortures, everything that went on October the 7th.
Yeah. So we've built these relationships from the ground up with these the mayors and the municipality leaders and the security teams and social workers in all of these communities. We've 23 of them from Kiryat Shmona, right on the Lebanon border. I mean, it's like Lebanon, where it comes right down, is like half a kilometer away, the smallest point. And I was just actually in Kiryat Shmona talking with Avichai, the mayor, who actually is my age. He's a few years younger. And he said that this is a city of 24,000 people. They've relocated or evacuated 22,000. And he said the city itself has had 700 impacts. So missiles, mortars, and suicide drones streaking into the city, blowing things completely up. You see melted cars, total devastation, shrapnel that has gone through cement walls. It's absolutely devastating. And they have intercepted 1,400 missiles over the city. And then they're dealing with forest fires. So this is our Mayor Avichai in Kiryat Shmona. This is what's impacting him, what he's living on a daily basis. And then we go all the way down south. And we have our communities of Sderot, Netivot, Ofakim, Mitzpeh Ramon, Beit Shemesh, communities that were attacked, or communities that had 4,000 or 5,000 displaced people suddenly just like flow into these communities and fill up all their hotels. So October 7th impacted the whole nation. It was absolutely terrible, but there was another level for us. We felt that our people, our recipients, our mayors, our people had been attacked and murdered. You saw in the video the pictures of Kfar Aza in happier times. That was in 2016. We put in bomb shelters and we partnered with Shmuel Bauman, and they brought the whole kindergarten class out there to sing. And most of the educators were all murdered. Lots of those children murdered when the Hamas terrorists came in. Kibbutz Be'eri, same thing. Ofakim had 55, I believe, murdered in Ofakim. These are communities we've walked with so often. We've visited these communities on a regular basis. So on a week, we make deliveries with our vans. We communicate with the mayors. They would give us lists of, this is what we need. This is how you can help. That's in normal times. Now, it's like I have hundreds of children that need to go to school. They've lost all of their homes. They literally had nothing coming out. can you help us? They have to go to school here, but they have nothing. So we have 350 children on our Feed a Child program. We took like another 500 children. So it's just, everything just balloons, everything escalates. A common sight going into the cities and towns, our cities and towns now, a common sight in the mayoral offices or the municipal buildings are the photos of community members who were murdered. And that brings about a heaviness. It's personal. It's almost like we feel like our family, our own home was broken into. I was in South Africa just over a month ago, and I had an elderly woman who's Israeli South African ask me, I grew up in Ofakim, and then I moved to South Africa. This is unbelievable if you think about this. I'm giving a speech, and I come to the Q&A, and she asks, if I gave you a list of names, can you see if they're still alive? And I was standing there, and people are crying. I'm just staring at this woman thinking, you didn't just say, if I give you a list of names, can you like go to the mayor and find out if they're living? And she was desperate. She said, I haven't heard from them in months. So this is what we're facing each and every day. And I believe it's like in the midst of hell on earth, like something so, you mentioned like, and it's not even enough to say the rape and mutilations to even try to construct these images in our minds, because they filmed it all. They slaughtered children in front of their parents. They slaughtered parents in front of their children. They did horrific rape on minors to elderly people. I've met people in Starot who knew a 7-year-old girl who was gang raped to death. And when you try to like wade through this mentally, I mean, it just is such a heaviness. It brings you to tears, and then it reminds you. It almost stands you right back up. And you're like, I have been called for such a time as this. Christians all over the world use that. For such a time as this, especially Christians who stand with Israel. Now we're actually living out what that means. And remember, Mordecai says to Esther, if you don't do anything, your house will perish. Salvation will still come salvation will come from another side, from another place. God will step in and act, but he's called you for such a time as this, or for such a crisis as this. And that gives me strength, it gives me health, and it propels me forward, even though I go through many, many, many sleepless nights, even though I struggle with anger at times. And you see this, they didn't just kill Jews, they slaughtered Muslims. They're the 100 and I think it's 101 now hostages from 23 countries, Jews, Muslims, Hindus. The youngest is the Bebas children, I believe are 1 and 4 years old. That just, especially as a parent with your own children, you just cannot even compute what kind of people do that.
And this is the big wake up, and this is the big question, isn't it? The church's response to October the 7th. Israel experienced a mini Holocaust on October the 7th. Yeah. And the vast majority, sadly, of the evangelical church is silent.
Yes.
And that is deafening.
Yes.
Because we all like to take the moral high ground. We all like to say, you know, if the Holocaust happened on my watch, we would stand up against it.
Yes, this is what I would have done.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we now see silence.
Yeah.
If not, we're seeing our mainstream churches turning against Israel, taking on the Palestinian narrative and the Palestinian cause within our churches, which is anathema to God. Just share with us your response to the indifference, the apathy from so much of the evangelical church in the West, and particularly with the Jewish communities across the world, here in this country, who are living in fear. They're scared after the horrors of October the 7th and this unprecedented rise in Jew hatred.
Yeah, Simon, in my mind, when October 7th happened, the themes of light and darkness have not left my mind, my conscience. I keep thinking of light and darkness. The Bible, from cover to cover, it's like right at creation, Jesus, the light of the world. I mean, what you encounter, and we are called to be a light. We are called to worship God in spirit and truth. We are called to make an impact and push back darkness. And to do that, the only way to do that is to count the cost. We see in the Holocaust years, we see so many Christians were unwilling to do that. Some were. Dietrich Bonhoeffer and many. We know thousands of Christian priests and pastors and People were even sent to concentration camps. The Nazis murdered people. But you're talking about Christian Europe, hundreds of millions of people, most people, self-censored. They went along with it. They were, well, this is too divisive. I can't interject. And some of that, okay, you can process case by case, but still, at the end of the day, the majority of the church was unwilling to really count the cost to do something. So the Jewish community in the nations, here in your country, in my country, Canada, all over the world, are feeling cut off, alienated, hated, and very vulnerable. Some of them are still trying to cling to, you know, I'm British or I'm Canadian. I can just, you know, I have a good life here. It's comfortable. This will blow over. And then many are saying, well, maybe I should leave. Maybe this is the time. And many others are actually leaving. Some nations that have had Jewish populations for centuries, France, is beginning to empty. That may even happen here, Canada, things like this in the near future. So that's the Jewish community. The church, I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you were referring to the Christian response. And the week after October 7th, most churches didn't pray for Israel. They self-censored. Oh, it's too controversial. It's divisive. They're unwilling to count the cost. And many, oh, it'll split my church, or people will get angry, or they'll send me a nasty letter, or maybe someone will vandalize my property, or some extremists here or there. But you have to count the cost. We not only just want to educate, okay, because you can watch safely in your living room. You can watch a YouTube video, maybe from Bridges for Peace. You can watch Revelation TV. Nobody has to know. So you can get education, but be silent. No, we can't be a silent majority. I'm not talking about anarchy, but we have to get out. We have to be a voice for truth. And sometimes love can be tough love. So sometimes it has to have real strength, and it has to be very bold, but it has to be spoken out. People have to notice. The Hebrew word for faith is emunah, and it's not just a mental exercise, it's something that's noticed. God is faithful, and we see it. And so he calls us, who would love God and want to love what God loves, my goodness, if I'm going to be faithful, it's going to be seen. It should be seen. If it's not, that's a serious problem. And so we are asking the church, we're reminding the church, we're educating the church, you have to count the cost. Don't repeat. This is the way forward. Not that we have all the answers, but this is what God is revealing. Look at his word. The biblical literacy in the church is massive. No wonder they're swallowing all kinds of things, and not just on the Israel issue, but they're swallowing all kinds of things on the pro-life, pro-choice, marriage, family, all of these things. It's because they're undiscerning. We need to be discerning. And so we educate, but then we want people to take action. Pray, give, come to Israel, volunteer, see it with your own eyes, connect with people. We're not against Palestinian Arabs. I mean, over 2 million Israeli citizens are Arab, Palestinian. So it's like, no, we just free Gaza from Hamas. It's like exactly. the heart of the Lord needs to go in there and flow through those people and change their heart, as it needs to change all of our hearts. But there is an indoctrination and an agenda in this enclave that has been used to fuel a hatred and a violence that the world has not seen.
Yeah, we're down to the last few minutes of the programme, Peter, so I want to bring two things in. Firstly, we're seeing this repeated, that whenever Israel is touched, then this affects the nations. So in other words, Genesis 12, 1-3, I will bless those who bless you, I will curse those who curse you. And because the nation's allowing Israel to face that bloodshed on their streets, that same bloodshed is going to come around the world. And the same danger that Israel's facing is the same danger that Canada faces.
Yes.
The same danger that the United Kingdom faces. Yes. And so what we're facing really is how the Islamists are using the cause of Gaza in order to Islamize. And they are flexing their political muscles, and our very democracies at threat. And particularly if our governments are no longer standing with Israel, we're in real danger that our own, everything that we've known in Europe, everything that the freedoms we know in the United States are now under threat because our governments are not standing with Israel. Just share with us and unpack a little bit more of that, and also tell us how our viewers can get involved and support the incredible work you guys are doing at Bridges for Peace. Yeah,
you know, the thing is, and Hamas, their masters, they don't care about the people of Gaza. Their masters are the Ayatollahs of Iran. Iran, China, Russia, there's a movement in the world right now to not just Islamize. That is a key. That is a strategic key. But it's the disintegration of Judeo-Christian values, of Christianity, of the Bible, of democracy, of like the eradication of the family. All of these things, they're all connected. And they want to export what they have in Tehran, what you see the Houthis, what you see Hezbollah, what you see in Syria. They want to export that Gaza right into our streets. That actually is the agenda. It's this global caliphate. It's the plan. You know, I met with the security heads of Kiryat Shmona. They showed me a video produced by Hezbollah in 2015 showing missiles hitting Naharia, Kiryat Shmona, and then incursions both by sea and by land of Hezbollah conquering the north. They said liberating the Galilee. And the security heads said, we didn't think this would ever be possible. Israel is like that first line of defense.
Exactly.
But it will spill over. And this is the thing. Darkness either wants you to self-censor, because then you become this insignificant person. It just washes over you. Or they're going to eliminate you, or they want you to applaud it, to get on board with it. And we're seeing that. And it will be the disintegration of everything that we hold. We don't have to be afraid as believers, because my trust is in the Lord. It is terrifying in a human perspective, and to see everything that we love coming under assault, which is why we should speak up. But my trust ultimately is in the Lord. But to see the vulnerability of everything that has been built, our families, life as we know it, coming under attack, ultimately we know the source of that. It's not Hamas, it's not the Ayatollahs, it's a satanic, demonic nature and person, and which is where it comes from.
So within 20 seconds, tell us how our
Yes.
viewers can support Bridges for Peace.
Yes, go to the bridgesforpeace.com, check us out on social media. We're all on the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can give, you can connect with the UK office. You will find those details on the website. Our National Director, Michael Traharn, would love to connect with you. You can go to Israel and volunteer. You can go on study tours. You can pray for Israel.
Peter, I just want to thank you for such an inspirational interview, and thank you so much for sharing your heart and your passion and love of Israel and the Jewish people.
Thank you, Simon.
And I just want to thank you for watching this program at home. I think it's essential that as Christians we stand up now and really support Israel and the Jewish people, and please do support the incredible ministry that is Bridges for Peace. So thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.